welcome. This is Larry Hembree with the LaGotiTribune.com. Today we're going to have a conversation with Larry Bucshon, the 8th District Congressman. He resides from Newburgh, Indiana. Welcome, Larry.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks for stopping into our studios. We're going to have a conversation today about the way ahead of the federal government and some of the key legislative issues of our day and our time. And let's just start out with what's on everybody's mind with the Tea Party coming, the influence in the elections. It's all about the debt, isn't it?
It is about the debt. I think the biggest thing, if you look at what people are really concerned about out there in the district, it's unemployment, job creation, and as part of that, the federal budget and the inability of the federal government to get its fiscal house in order is a major factor.
Well, let's start with the issues that we've had with the federal deficit has been the continual raising of the debt ceiling.
Yeah.
And it looks like the Republicans in Congress are playing a harder line. Maybe the Democrats in the Senate looking for more wiggle room. But what's your feelings on the deficit, and what would be your thoughts on supporting raising the debt ceiling or not raising it?
Well, right now, unless there are significant spending changes attached to a debt ceiling vote, I will not be in favor of raising the debt ceiling. And let me say that what that will have to entail. We need to, in the 2012 budget coming up, we need to scale back our spending to a more sustainable level. So there has to be short-term cuts in spending to get us back, at least I think, to 2008 levels. Over the last 2 years, the federal government spending has gone up by over 20%, and it's not sustainable. We have a huge budget deficit, $1.5 trillion, the largest in history. So that's the first thing that's going to have to be part of the debt ceiling vote. The other thing is we're going to have more long-term changes to the way we spend money. And we're going to have to address entitlement spending, mandatory spending as part of that. And I think both sides of the aisle are beginning to recognize that without modifying what we're doing with our entitlement spending, it'll be impossible really for our government to continually have to borrow money to spend money that we don't have. And then the other thing is, I believe that we're going to have to ultimately have a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution, which is solid, because historically, as you know, Washington, D.C. Has not had the ability to live within its means. And I'm a co-sponsor right now on the House side of a balanced budget amendment, which on the Senate side, the companion bill has all 47 Republican senators signed on. This is a good bill. It's one of the more solid balanced budget amendment proposals that's been out there in a long time. If those things aren't beginning to be in place, I just don't see us blindly raising the debt ceiling.
Well, let's circle back on the constitutional amendment in a second. And on the debt ceiling itself, you talk about significant short-term savings going back to maybe 2008 levels.
Yeah.
If we go back to the 2008 levels, what are the targeted budget reductions? I mean, where are those coming from?
I think we have to look at everything. I think that across our budget, if we only limit ourselves to certain areas of the budget, it's only a small percentage. So we have to look at agency spending, how we're funding all the federal agencies, the really massive increase in funding to people like EPA and others. We are going to have to look at what we're doing with defense and whether or not there's more savings in the Department of Defense than we've already recognized. And I think there are most likely are some that don't affect the warfighter. And I think people on both sides of the aisle recognize that. We need to look there and make sure that we have an efficient and effective Department of Defense and not wasteful. We are going to have to begin to address entitlement spending going forward. I don't think we'll get permanent changes now to our entitlement spending as part of this debt ceiling agreement, but I have to see a clear pathway for solving the entitlement spending problem. So those are the things we're going to have to get in place. Really, all aspects of the federal government needs to be looked at. There are some programs that probably need more funding. There are many that need much less. There are some programs that need to be consolidated and eliminated for efficiencies. we've seen this. There was a Government Accountability Office report about 2 months ago, and showing the duplicative programs in the federal government, and it's really an eye-opening report. If you haven't seen it, you should Google it, because, for example, in the Department of Education, in one area related to teacher education, there's 82 separate federal programs, and each one of those programs has its own bureaucracy. So there's efficiencies across the government that we have to look at.
Regarding the 2008 budget, my assumption would be that in 2008 we were already in deficit spending. So are the revenues such today that if we went back to 2008 spending, are we still going to be in a deficit spending mode?
We'll be in a slightly deficit spending mode, but here's the thing. If the federal government can show fiscal restraint and get and stabilize what we're doing at the federal level, I think we'll start to come out of this recession and we'll get economic growth. And with economic growth and the certainty that will be created, I think our revenues will increase without raising taxes. In that vein, there's a couple other things. Not only the spending that we're doing, we need to get our tax code stable. Right now, we're on a 2-year extension of the personal tax code, for the personal tax rates, and I think we need to, whether you agree that they should be increased or decreased, the point is, people out there, especially employers, small businesses, need to know where we're going to be in 2 years. A 2-year extension did not help for the uncertainty. The other thing is, on the regulatory side, right now, in my view, the administration is propagating a lot of new regulation that business people see as detrimental to job creation. Along with that, that includes the new regulations coming on board through Health and Human Services with the Obamacare Act, with the Affordable Care Act, and others. So, I think it will get economic growth if we can get those things under control. And yes, the 2008 budget had a much smaller deficit. I can't remember the exact number, but it was very small compared to what we have today. But with economic growth and then other long-term changes to the way we spend money, I think eventually we'll be able to get to a situation where we're not deficit spending.
Well, historically speaking, maybe even going back in the Clinton administration, in '94, Republicans came into Congress and the Senate, and they talked about getting serious about deficit reduction, but what actually happened was the economy grew. I don't think there was much cutback in spending. Plus we had
exactly right.
Plus we had lower oil prices. When you look at today's economic opportunities for growth, where do you see the opportunities for growth to occur in this environment where we see constantly we're not allowed to expand our energy business because we got offshore drilling issues. We have really kind of dead in the water on the nuclear side, especially what went on in Japan. Where does the growth come from in America?
Yeah, I think first of all, let's touch on that as it comes to what the federal government's doing with stymieing job creation right now. We just passed on the House side 3 bills this week that directly address our domestic energy production. I feel like the administration has stymied that type of growth, like you say, in the energy sector, based on a policy that is not granting permits for companies to drill for our own oil. And I think on the nuclear side, the Japan episode did set us back a little bit, but I still have confidence in nuclear energy because I feel like it's been very successful in other countries, especially France. Overall, it is safe. The incident in Japan was like a once in a 500-year event that couldn't have been predicted. Overall, nuclear energy has been safe, but most of our growth in our economy, I think, is going to be in the high tech sector, the technical, internet related, internet type related businesses, But I do think if we can get back away from some of the things the federal government's been doing with regulation, I think we can bring back some of the manufacturing part and regain some growth there. One of the things that's stymieing that again is the U.S. tax code, which I just talked about, on the corporate side. Tax certainty on the corporate side will bring jobs back. So I think there's a lot of areas for growth yet. And I think the federal government just needs to, we need to try to step out of the way of business and let it happen. And right now we're not doing that.
Well, Ronald Reagan, when he became president, kind of brought a message that of optimism about it was okay for small business owners and entrepreneurs to make a profit. There wasn't something wrong with that.
I agree with that.
Does it seem like to you that under the current administration that the philosophy is that maybe there's something wrong with that, and therefore a lot of entrepreneurs and small business owners may not have the confidence or the optimism in this kind of environment to even want to invest their money for a return when the tax rates look like they might want to go up, even though one part of the House says no? How do you address just the basic optimism to make entrepreneurs want to invest their money to generate economic growth?
Yeah, I think your point is well taken, that under this current environment with what the administration is doing, I feel like, and when I talk to small business owners, they tell me that people like yourself and other small business people are very resistant to invest in new businesses. And the honest answer is, I think, in my view, until we get a change in administration, we're going to have difficulty with that, because their view is, and it's evident in their policies, is that, like you say, profit is not necessarily a good thing. They see that in those large and small businesses. This administration, multiple people have said, is one of the ones that is the worst for business that we've seen in decades. And that's just not my opinion. That's what's happening out in the country. And until I think we change administration and move forward with people that understand, in my view, what America's founded on and what America's all about, and that's small business, entrepreneurial spirit, people willing to take a risk to be successful, and people that are successful benefiting from that success without being punished by the tax code or regulatory climate at the federal level, we're not going to have a change. So I think everybody that I've talked to in business is telling me the same thing, that unless we get a change in administration for the next, in 2012, we're going to have a difficult time in getting people to expand their business or create a new business.
You talked earlier about a constitutional amendment for a balanced budget, but realistically speaking, how realistic is that when the Republicans in the Senate and the House, or in the Senate are in the minority, in the House you have a clear majority, and you have a Democratic president who probably would not sign on to something like that?
Yeah, I tell you, it depends. Because I think, honestly, that there was obviously a lot of Republican support, but we're starting to see some Democrat support for this type of spending control also. Now, will we be able to get the 2/3 votes in the Senate? I doubt it. But my point is, the American people understand, or I think, are a little bit ahead of the politicians on this issue, and they understand, and they have for many years, that unless there's controls on what the federal government does, both parties really, historically, are not going to live within our means. And so, I think where the balanced budget amendment comes in is that I'm hopeful it'll come up for a vote. It will clarify people's position on that, and then we'll see how that affects the 2012 election. The American people can decide. Do people like me that want control of the federal budget so that the politicians can't spend more than we take in, or do they feel like we want to continue to go on a pathway where the federal government continues to spend money that it doesn't have, ultimately resulting in higher tax rates on everyone, not just the top earners? But realistically, the balanced budget amendment alone, as part of the debt ceiling vote, is not enough for me, because your point's well taken. The likelihood of it actually coming through the Congress is probably pretty low. It's more. I think it's more in the court of public opinion about what the American people want is where it's important, and that's why I'm in favor of it.
What do you say to the other side of the argument about a constitutional amendment that while you cannot spend more you can take in, it would be an abusive environment by law, you would have to raise taxes, because if you couldn't control spending through Congress, then you would have to place a burden to raise those revenues.
That's a valid argument, and that's why I'm on board with this particular balanced budget amendment, because it has specific, I don't have it in front of me, it has specific controls on tax increases. And you have to have a super majority in both the Senate and the House for any tax increases. It makes it a very difficult process to increase taxes based on increased government spending. So previous balanced budget amendments, and your point is well taken, didn't have as much restriction on tax increases, and that's why most people didn't favor those. But this bill, the one that I'm supporting, has pretty significant controls in place that would prevent tax increases, except in the instant, another world war or some. It gives some freedom for the federal government to increase spending for catastrophic events, like if we suddenly are in a war that would require us to increase our defense requirements. But otherwise, pretty restrictive. I wouldn't support anything that I thought would result in tax increases because the politicians can't control the spending.
If the government is going to have some kind of chance to control spending, do you have to address the systemic mission of the federal government itself?
Yes.
Speaking in terms constitutionally, one could make the argument, and many have, that systemically the government is outside the mission of the Constitution, the federal government speaking of. But after all this time of the states maybe releasing some of their, quote, sovereignty under the 10th Amendment, and the people kind of looking the other way, how do you rein it back in, and how do you even have a chance?